Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. I shall see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we'll be relaxing as per usual, just making sure that the sound is okay. I've got a towel on my head, so that is the main reason why. But yeah, we'll be doing like the usual daily gacha nonsense I do, I suppose, while also playing Animal Crossing. Just multitasking, you know. The best way to make time, I suppose, is to... Wait, hold on. That's not a phrase. The best way to have time is to make time. I just got a message from my friend on Steam, of all things. Interesting. I assume they want me to play Siege, but unfortunately I might not be able to. But good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 11:46 p.m. on Friday, May 24th, 2024. Because I'll be recording Animal Crossing, and then I need to work on a drawing. Not the thumbnail art, actually. It's a commission, but... stretch. It's okay. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a quick one, maybe it won't be. But it is not something I should theoretically put off any longer than I have to. But yeah, recording late night today. This is when the D&D session with Group 1 was moved to. It was a very interesting session this time. Mainly in the fact that weirdly very little happened. It was a lesson that got session that I feel like got definitely the most derailed out of all the other all the sessions, and in both an amusing sort of way, and definitely I don't think it would be sustainable for every session to be like that, but I'm fine, you know, with every once in a while having a very silly session like this. And I think that the best way I can describe it is it took about an hour and a half, which is we normally play for about 3 hours, for them to go from outside the town to inside the town. It was that basically sums up the entire thing. To be fair, actually, like, big things did happen towards the end of the session. I don't know if necessarily it was as big to them as it was to how I believed it, but it was a pretty big. The Fire and Mystery Collection is apparently the book I've got today in Neopets. That's my weekly. Let's see how much it's worth. 300,000? That's not enough. No. When it's over about 1 million is when I start starting to do the weekly quest for. Oh, you know what? At some point I was talking about the fact that the Neopets Woodland Paintbrush was selling for like 1.4 million Neopoints, and I was like, that's pretty cheap. I wonder if it will go lower. And when I checked again, and it was back up to like 1.7 million, I was like, I'm gonna say 300,000 Neopoints if I just sprung on that deal I saw then. I mean, maybe it still exists, to be perfectly honest. A long fur coat though is one of the items, so I'll at least do that much. Yes, I'm also going to open Clip Studio Paint. Why not? Because I will be using it almost immediately afterwards. But as I turn on my tablet, what are we going to talk about today? I don't really know. Like, I mean, sometimes I would talk about D&D, but there's really not. But there's not like much for me to give behind the scenes viewpoints on in the D&D session, to be honest. Like, honestly, like very little for me as a DM to really comment on. Like, there was only I roleplayed some other characters here and there. I will say I think the biggest thing which is notable for me from a DM perspective is they asked about something which I genuinely could not remember. Which, to my credit, it was not something which was part of the world. It's something silly that they did. I guess the long and short of it is that they want to verify that the people who they speak to are the people who they are speaking to. So they asked one of the people like about something which happened early on, and I just had to fully admit, being like, it's not in my notes and I don't remember. So the character says whatever whatever would be correct, because they probably remember. Which, if anything, was bound to happen eventually. I'm running 2 D&D sessions. I'm doing a lot of random things here and there. I have a good memory, but I don't have a perfect memory. And honestly, it might be actually written in my notes somewhere, but my notes, like, bundling on to the lack of time, I suppose. Like, it takes a lot of time to even prepare the D&D sessions. It takes longer to be able to go through them afterwards and review them and compile them together to notes which have, like, quick access. So while I've got Notion to have, like, an overview of things that's going on, my day-to-day session notes are not, like, that comprehensive. The hardest thing is actually genuinely taking the notes at the same time as doing the session. Because when it's like I need a transcriber or something. I need someone to take down notes for me so I can refer to them, because it's like, oh, they asked like a question, something, and like, I don't really want to break up the pacing by being like, oh, hold on a second, let me just type that down or something. I want to keep the thing flowing, you know. But that's just something you just have to get better at, I suppose. And plus, mistakes happen. Who really cares at the end of the day? Because it's something which, I mean, I would get it if it was more of like a consequential mistake, where it's just like, hey, we like played this entire game on this premise, and then now you're telling us it's false. I'd be like, okay, that's fair enough. That's not really what I wanted to happen. This was just like a really minor thing, to be honest. But I do find it funny. I think it's a good milestone, you know. Like, maybe it's weird to say. It's nice to have failures, I suppose, as a milestone in some sort. I mean, okay, failures is far too strong a word in this case. I don't want, like, the perception to be like, oh, I'm, like, beating myself up for not remembering this. That's natural, you know. There's actually been a lot more things which I, like, forgot for other sessions, but I was either able to improv through it, or, you know, I vaguely remembered it enough. This one, like, I didn't even... like, I could have guessed, but the guess I had would have been wrong. What I was more surprised is that literally everyone else in the session remembered, but I guess it's probably because they're more cognizant of the immediate things which are happening, rather than necessarily everything else which is going on, which is fair, because that's not really their job, right? But I think failure milestones are actually, like, an important thing to have, like... I don't even know how to phrase this, because I feel like no matter how I phrase this, it makes me kind of sound like a bit of a lunatic. But I mean, I'm very much someone who, obviously, I try and strive for doing well and strive for. But no, here we go. Turns out that this was going to be a philosophical Dear Darling episode today. I'm very much someone who, I know I can be a bit of a perfectionist, but I am someone who tries to strive for perfection, or the best to my ability. But I feel like now I have a healthier relationship with it, where I understand failure is commonplace. And I understand I'm very much someone who tends... I'm not going to say I'm necessarily harsher on myself. Maybe then I'm harsher on myself than the average person would be, but that's just kind of like who I am. It's not like in a way where I beat myself up over mistakes, but I guess perhaps the word would be like I'm more critical. I take things from a much more critical perspective of myself, and maybe the average person does. Maybe not everyone. I don't necessarily know. But at the same time, I allow myself to feel... you know, proud of, like, accomplishments. Maybe that I mean, I think that's probably to the surprise of no one if you, like, listen to, like, any of my videos, like, especially the puzzle solving ones, where I'm just like, oh, I solved a puzzle. I think the more normal human response would be like, yes, I solved it, let's go to the next one. I'll be like, I can't believe I finally did it. While my response is, oh, you know, I should have done it like this, or I should have done it like that. That makes more sense. Which I think is probably very reflective of who I am. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, everyone's different in a sense. We all have different ways we interact and face the world. And I suppose as long as it's a non-destructive way, not a way which you're upset with necessarily, then what's the harm, you know? So that's why I think, like, failure milestones are, like, a cool thing, you know? And I'm trying to think of, like, a good example. I think one which is interesting when I'm drawing, which I don't know if it necessarily applies to other people as much, because I feel like a lot of artists tend to be incredibly self-critical of their own art, but almost to the extent where they look at their own art and then be like, this is trash, and I'm like, no, it's not trash. Like, obviously, no one's perfect, things can definitely be improved, but if you go in with a mindset of everything you draw is trash, and I feel like that tends to be far more destructive than it is constructive, in my personal opinion, but who knows. But I think one of the more interesting milestones, I think, when an artist is when I finish drawing something and I look back at it and be like, I'm really proud of this. That's a fantastic success milestone. But an interesting failure milestone is when you look back at something which, after you've drawn it, you're like, I was really proud of this. And now you look at it and be like, oh, you know, I could definitely do way better now. I guess that's not really a failure, but it's more like a being able to... I don't know. I guess it's kind of like indicative of your skills have improved so much that they've surpassed the point of when you thought your skills already had improved so much, you know? Like, I probably get that kind of vibe with a lot of YouTube thumbnails I draw. Like, let's take that as an example, because this is something which you have more access to, you can easily see. But I remember being really proud of... Let me think of one I was really proud of. To begin, like Hollow Knight, but that's a good one. I was really happy with a Hollow Knight YouTube thumbnail art when I finished it, and now looking back at it, I could do it much better, to be perfectly honest. It's not bad by any stretch of your imagination, but I think it's doing a lot of heavy lifting with an interesting sort of texture I use, but the anatomy is kind of weird. Like Dee's eyes are really far apart. It strangely looks a bit flat, and the ruffles of the clothing don't look very natural whatsoever. The background she's standing on is way too prominent that it takes away from the picture. And I don't know, it's not quite, you know, right in line with Hollow Knight's art style. It's there, but it's getting there, but it's not quite perfect, you know. It's not quite, but basically long short is I could do better now. And the major thing which stands out to me about this YouTube thumbnail art is it took me so long. It took me like, I think 8 or 9 hours to do this, when if I did it now, I would probably do it in like a long thumbnail art, like excluding the Animal Crossing ones, because the Animal Crossing ones are super long. A long thumbnail art, I would say now, I would ballpark around like 4 hours or something. I'd be like, that's a long one. Most of them, like, they take me like 2 to 2.5 hours. And I think that's mainly because I understand like prioritization now. I understand which parts can be seen and which parts can't be seen in thumbnail art. Like, if I did this Hollow Knight one, I wouldn't draw all of those shells in that much detail and spend so long rendering each one because they fade away into the background. You can hardly see them. I remember spending so long drawing each one so meticulously. But it's interesting to think back on. So I don't know, hopefully that sort of like explains this idea of failure milestones to me. And I'm trying to think of like another good one as well. Like maybe you're participating in a sport or something. Going to your first competition is a really great milestone. Even when just participating, even if you come like bottom 10 or something, I feel like most people reasonably should be stoked about it. You know, you entered a competition, that's a crazy scary thing to do, and then you like did your best, and even if you didn't do all that well, it's great being even having that opportunity to do it in the first place. So I guess like the milestone in this case would be like your first second place at competition, which is a sort of like a bitter victory in that sense, where it's like really, like, it's fantastic to do second place, but you're like, oh, just so close to doing first place. Like, isn't it a thing where Olympic medalists, that like you're happiest when you win, and then you're second happiest when you come third, and then like second place is something like much lower down in like a happiness scale. Not that you're unhappy, but it's just sort of like, because the Olympic happens so infrequently, people get into the mindset of like, and understandably so, like maybe I would as well, I was being like so close to being in first place. All it took would be one more thing, you know, one harder push, or, you know, just one more, you know, day of training or something like that. Maybe it would have been enough. Who knows? But I think that marks a very important milestone. You know, it's important to mark these successes and failures as milestones. I guess what I don't mean failures as in like total failures. I guess you might argue about failure milestone would be like being disqualified from a race or something, and I'd be like, okay, that's fair enough. I guess what I mean is more like incomplete success milestones, you know. Like if we're taking things on a hero's journey, you've got to go up, and you got to, you know, as you have like the rising anticipation, then you have like the setback, and then you have a climax or something of the plot. You know, you got to have those setbacks as well, and you got to pay attention to those as milestones. I'm trying to think of like another good example. Like I don't know, like I used to do like maths challenges when I was younger. I used to be like pretty good at them, despite the fact I really did not prepare for them. And I remember one year I did them. I can't remember, maybe it's year 12 or year 13. It was like the second last year or last year, where I basically you had to get like a certain score threshold to qualify, and basically for like the past few years I'd gone like the highest or the second highest score like in the school, and this year like I got like I for whatever reason I just did absolutely terribly. I got enough to qualify for the next higher round, but it was surprising because like I came like 10th or something in 11th school, which is still fantastic, but it was a great like failure milestone, because I don't know, I think it sort of like lit a fire underneath me at that point. Rather, I was just like, oh, you know, I can't just like do this so lackadaisically anymore, you know, I don't get too arrogant, don't get too cocky, you still got to focus. And if anything, it's not like a failure or anything, but being able to have a failure and being able to like move on from it, you know, is an important like learning experience to have. Certainly something I feel like took me a while to get my head around, you know, if we're gonna be all honest here. And maybe that doesn't surprise you, maybe it does, I don't know. Failure is a natural part of learning, which I very much understand now, but when I was younger, very much it was, you know, it felt more devastating. And that's just natural, you know, when you're younger and failing something feels terrible. You want to do well at something. There's not, I don't know anyone who goes into things being like, oh, I want to fail at something. People presumably are like, I want to do well. And that's like, right, why wouldn't you want to do well at something? And I don't think, you know, accepting failure needs to go hand in hand with like, oh, you shouldn't keep trying to do well at something. But it's more like you should understand that if you don't, you can try and do well. And then sometimes you're doing well or doing as best as you can wasn't good enough in this case. And then it doesn't work out, you know? And that in itself, I think, is a great learning opportunity. Which I guess is now easy for me to say because it's something I can view as a learning opportunity. But certainly if you talk about to like 12-year-old me, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, I definitely agree. While in my heart, I'd be like, no, I'm wrong. I wonder what the most like biggest failure I faced in my life is, which has like built a learning experience for me. Life is full of failures and setbacks, but I don't know, what's the definitive failure for me? I still remember my maths challenge one, even though it really wasn't much of a failure, but I guess it was a failure to me because of my very high standards. And if anything, it got me to like appreciate how well I do in the first place, and then, you know, actually motivated me to actually put more effort into these things, like don't let my potential just sort of sit there idly. You know, while your potential naturally is very good to coast on, how much better could it be if you actually like put some effort in as well at the same time? So I think I did pretty well in the next round as well. I think it must have been in my last year of secondary school. So I think that was when, because basically there's a senior maths challenge, and then you go do the BMO test, and then there's a BMO2. I think that was the first year I got into the BMO2, which was like the second round afterwards, and I was like psyched. I did terribly in the BMO2, to be perfectly honest, because I had no training on how to like solve these sort of maths problem-esque things. So like I solved a problem and did not understand what on earth to do. I think I got like 6 marks out of 60 and 80 or 40 or something, which amusingly, to get a commendation, I think you need like 10 or something, which is honestly pretty good for the fact that I had no idea how to prove things mathematically at that point. I was so stoked to get there, you know. And would I have been so stoked to get there if I didn't have a failures beforehand? I don't know. So I'm not going to say I'm thankful necessarily for failures in that sense. I'm more like I'm thankful for my own attitude towards accepting failures in that sense. Sorry, I know this is like a very strange sort of like not metaphorical, but like life lesson-esque Dear Darling video again. But I think they're fun to talk about, you know. These sort of things are like more like exploration of a soul, of a self, aren't they? Well, to me they are. So don't be surprised, I suppose, when I have an exploration of a self / a soul. That's just who I am. And I guess it's more like I find it fascinating in the first place. Breaking down the human psyche in that sense. Your reaction to things. Are they normal? Are they not normal? Who knows? What should be considered a norm? What shouldn't? Etc, etc. Fascinating, is it not? Yeah. I've not really been doing my gacha games. Oh, I need to make a thumbnail art. So failure. A failure milestone. I really wonder what my biggest failure milestone is / was. I feel like a lot of them I remember tend to be academically based, to be honest. Maybe because those are the sort of things where it's like I didn't fail in as much. Like I remember one time I got like 60% on my history. Oh no, one thing I remember is I got 6 out of 10 on a spelling test once, and I felt just so gutted. I felt like it was devastating at the time. Obviously, it doesn't even matter now. But for someone who got 9s and 10s, getting a 6 was like, what's happening? And the teacher didn't make it better, because the teacher was like, you know, I'm thinking of moving you down to the lower spelling grade test, which I assume was meant to be like lighting a fire, but honestly it crushed me at the time. You might be like, how old were you? I think I was like 6 or 7 or something. No, 7 or 8 at the time, thinking of a teacher who it was. I'm sure she didn't mean that in like a bad way. I'm sure she just meant like as a motivation thing, being like, hey, come on dear darling, you can do better than this. Like, what's going on? Because to be honest, I didn't I didn't even look at the words. It's so silly to say now, but like I didn't even look at the words of what would have been spelling test. I just like waltzed in and been like, okay, I think I know how to spell this, and just got like did decently well. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that was probably quite a definitive one from such an early age, when I was like so young. I don't know. I'm sure everyone's got different ones depending on like the situations that they've been with. I'm not sure what doodle to put here. I'm going to put like a milestone. So I'll put like a square. Was it like fall, 7, rise, 8? It's like a Japanese saying of like, you can fall over 7 times, rise up 8 times, something like that. Which, does that even make sense? No, it does make sense. If you start with a rise up, and then it alternates 4 rise, 4 rise, 4 rise, 4 rise, then you can rise up more times than you fall, right? 4 down, 7, get up 8. Is that it? 4 down, 7 times, get up 8. I don't really know where I was going with this. Anyway, I'm going to round this episode off here. Who knows what I'm talking about anymore? You know what? Maybe I will play some Siege with my friends. And then I'll finish off this commission a bit later. Who knows? Anyway, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now. Why stop recording? There it is.